They're just
I would
doing
assume
it on their iPhone
yeah,
like this?
probably.
Oh.
Or probably just like recording sound.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so
So she didn't preview me on like anything you're gonna ask me, so hopefully my answers will be.
Nope. So I'm just gonna go over.
Okay.
If I ask you something that we just were talking about.
Yeah, so just before you
Okay.
start, like just give me like a little background on like what this is for. So it's an organizational management class. What was it?
That's correct.
And what's the point? Like what's the teacher trying to do?
So something that we focus on is obviously there's so many different aspects to an organization, but we try to focus on like the individual, what ethnicities, diversity.
Yeah.
Pretty much like how one individual plus a bunch of other individuals could create the company.
Right.
And how they could how they could provide ideas for the company, but also how they could set it back.
Okay.
So like I said, it's
By coming from their own unique perspective.
exactly.
Okay.
So like I said, they could provide, but then also they could
Yeah.
take away. So that's mostly what we try to learn about, how the good and bad about an organization and its behavior essentially in the organization.
Okay. That's pretty interesting.
So I asked.
So each group had to interview one person, or you're interviewing lots of different people? Okay, you each chose
just one manager, yes.
And you chose a law firm because each of you are doing a different type of organization, or you just wanted to do a law firm?
Well, it's a collective of us, so it's 6
Okay.
members, and like I said earlier, I want to emphasize in law.
Right.
And I asked everyone else, hey, like, do you guys have any managers we could interview? Everyone had like one, I believe, but like for example, he has a brother who's a restaurant manager,
Okay.
but he's actually in another state.
Okay, that doesn't work.
Yeah, so
I see. So it's just a matter of like finding someone.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I was like,
So it's not like unique to law firms.
No, not necessarily.
Okay. But no one else will do a law firm probably in your class, so that'll be good. Okay.
So the first one, I asked this before, but just to reiterate, how many people do you manage again?
Yeah, so it's about 75 attorneys, and that obviously changes. Like we just actually hired one 2 weeks ago and one starting in a few weeks. So it's obviously changing, and we have one attorney that went on a sabbatical. Some go out on leave, so it's not a perfect number, but it ranges around 75 attorneys, and then we have probably another 25 to 30 staff.
Okay, sorry, I should have asked this before.
Yeah.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Amy Siegel. I am the managing partner of our Century City office of O'Melveny and Myers. We are a large international law firm with 15 offices around the world, and we have 3 offices in Southern California, downtown Los Angeles, Newport Beach, and Century City, and I manage the Century City office.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Want to ask the first question?
Okay, so our first question is, how do you make sure everyone works together with each other well and get things done?
Yeah, that's a challenge. So we do most of our staffing for our projects in teams. And so we have, I guess probably the critical piece of making sure everybody's working together properly is we have what's called work coordinators. So those are attorneys, those are partners at the law firm who know all the different projects that we have going on. And so they also know all of our attorneys, and they look at it and say, okay, I think you should work on this matter. So they sort of assign the work. Some of them, some of the partners who are not the work coordinators will request or just sort of assign it anyway, but we always make sure that they let the work coordinators know so they can keep track of who's working on what. So that's kind of one critical step to make sure everybody's working together on what they should, so that they have somewhat equal balance of the workload. We don't have one associate who's working on 10 matters and another one who's not working on enough. That's one piece. And then we also have, on the staff side, we have assistants. Each attorney has an assistant, but the assistants will serve 4 to 5 attorneys on their desk. And so we have an office coordinator who works with all the assistants to make sure that workflow is balanced and working nicely and people enjoy working together. So those are kind of the probably organizational pieces that are critical to making sure it's all balanced. But then to make sure people get along and work nicely together, that takes a much broader effort. And we have all kinds of dinners and lunches and snacks. Food always helps. I mentioned that to you before when you came in. But we leave it up to the project teams to manage their own team. So if we're working on something for a client, and I mentioned to you the work coordinator is going to help decide who should be on that team, then the partner who's running that team will figure out how to do it. And it will totally depend on what the project is. Some projects may be so active that they need to have team meetings all the time, and they have email updates, or they have a chart that updates it. Some, it's much more loose and informal. It totally depends. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a big question. Yeah.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much. For the second question, do you encourage employees to work outside of the box, or do you want them to stick to a rigid plan? How and why?
So I thought you were going to ask outside of the office, but you mean outside of the box,
As
meaning to
in-
do something different than normal.
Yeah, instead of like, for example, let's just say going about something, obviously most of the time there's like a set
Yeah.
way. Do you encourage, once again, employees to like, if there's a better way of figuring something out,
Yeah.
to go for it, or to more?
Yeah, so absolutely we do. We encourage them to go outside of the box. So we hire, we have a very extensive hiring process to find the brightest young lawyers out of all the law schools. We're looking for top graduates in their class, but we're looking for people that are very well-rounded and have really interesting and unique experiences, diverse backgrounds. That's all very important to us. And the reason is because we want them, when they're on a project team, to come to us and say, why are we doing it this way? Maybe we should do it this way. And ultimately, it depends. You might have to do it the way that the partner decides. But we want people that are going to be smart and educated, but also will push the envelope, because as the world changes and the market changes and the consumer's mind changes, our work has to kind of follow that. So we're looking for young talent who can push the envelope for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. That answers it really well. Thank you.
Alright, and then for the third question we have, what are some of the ways you make sure employees work ethically? So for example, like having an independent team overseeing the work, make sure there's no errors.
Yeah. Well, ethics is a really big deal for lawyers. So your team's kind of unique than from the rest of your class, where we're held to a standard of ethics by the bar of California. We actually take an entrance exam as part of the bar exam. We separately take an ethics exam also, and we can't even become lawyers unless we have passed that. And I think we just assume it's a must, because it's a big part of being a lawyer is to be ethical. But yeah, we have partners oversight on everything that goes out the door, and that's again regulated by the bar. So we have to supervise the other attorneys we're working with as partners. We have to supervise the associates and make sure that the work is correct, but also that they kind of did all the work necessary to get the answer. They were thorough, and that they were ethical, right? So I think that's really just by law. It's sort of on our shoulders every day. But to be honest, we don't have a lot of trouble with it, because the people that we hire kind of know that comes with being a lawyer. But we take it very seriously. So there's no trick other than just managing the teams, going back to what you were asking. Making sure you are reviewing everything carefully. Ultimately, the client's going to look to the partner who's overseeing the work if anything's wrong, right? So even if an associate does something wrong, you're never going to point the finger at the associate. The partner has to take responsibility. So because of that responsibility, you check it.
So you work as a team to check on each other.
Work as a team. So an associate may draft something for me or work on an agreement. I do transactional work. There's also litigators in the office, so they may be writing a brief, or for example, let's say associate does a first draft of a brief. It's never going to be filed with the court unless the partner's reviewing it, correcting it, having him go back and check this. Why did you say it this way? explain your reasoning for it. There's a lot of that back and forth that goes on during the day to figure out how to get it right, and then ultimately gets filed. But it never gets filed without oversight.
Let me check the camera. Okay.
I hope it's been working.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. I'm gonna go for the fifth floor.
Or do you want
Make sure it's there. Oh no, yeah.
how do you make sure employees stay on task without being too invasive?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we have deadlines. So what I think the best way to deal with it is that we talk up front about what the expectation is, what the assignment is. We set a deadline, but I never set a deadline. That's the deadline. I have to get it out to the client. I have to build in time for that supervision and that back and forth, and assuming that it's going to need another round of turns. So, so an associate comes in, we have an assignment, explain what it is and what they need to do, and then I say, well, why don't you do this first part of it? Like, why don't you research this piece and then come back to me and we'll talk about that. And then why don't you draft this, and then, or why don't you get me the draft by this day, and then I build in time to review it. Never works out that perfectly, because then I've got 3 other things I'm also reviewing, and it doesn't mean there's not a mad rush at the end, but ideally, that's how you build it in. And our attorneys work extremely hard, and sometimes, late hours or weekends when they have to, because the client demands sometimes change unexpectedly. So part of, I think, this job is that those who agree to work here know that it's a demanding, often unpredictable schedule, which they don't love, but they kind of know it when they accept this job. It comes with the job. It's not a 9 to 5 kind of clock in. You don't clock in. You don't track your hours by way of being physically here at the office. You track your hours by how much you're billing to clients. So if you're here and you don't have anything to do, you're not writing that time down. And we measure performance in part on many things, but one of the elements we look at is how many hours that you build to client work during the end of the year. So it's not enough to just show up at work. So for that reason, sometimes you may get the work done at night at home. That still counts, but not too many people like to work in there.
I thank you so much for the answer. Actually, chapter we were just reviewing was about deadlines and stuff like that, and how sometimes companies have to take in consideration that if you put a deadline too rigorous of a deadline, it causes stress, it causes chaos and stuff like that within the individuals who have to meet that deadline. But then again, if you put it too open-ended, you could say, then those people might take advantage of it and might just
never gets done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's hard because the people that work for me, if they know I'm making up a deadline that's not real, it might frustrate them that I'm just unnecessarily doing that. But I try to explain to them, I'm going to have you give it to me on this date because I got to get it to the client by this date, and we need to build in some time in between. I try to be transparent about it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't sit on my desk for 2 days and they get frustrated. I mean, that's just part of the... So a good manager can try to manage that time perfectly. Nobody does it perfectly, but it does cause employees to be frustrated and unhappy when they stay up all night to get you something, and then you don't read it for 2 days. It's not great.
Moving to the next question.
Yeah.
How do you work with individual differences, such as someone who's a hard worker but has a high temper?
High temper's never great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot about communication. I mean, people have different working styles, and you do have to learn to work with your colleagues in different ways. So I think it's really just about communicating with what your expectation is, and then as long as it gets done, the different working styles can be adjusted and tolerated. But coming up, I haven't always been a partner, right? I was an associate first, and I worked with different partners who had very different working styles and different tempers. And so I knew that you kind of have to learn what people's preferences are. Like, I knew that one partner did not like to get anything at like 3-4 o'clock, at the end of the day, because he was trying to get out by a certain time to be home for dinner or whatever it was, and it really upset him to get that. So no matter when the deadline was or what had to be done, I knew to try to make sure that I got it to him by like 1 or 2 so that I avoided that. Because nothing upset him more than having something at 4 o'clock, because he's like, oh, now it's my problem. You get to go home and work out, and I'm stuck here at 5, 6 o'clock when I'd rather be home for dinner. So, but I learned that, and I worked around that. And if I knew that something was going to get jammed at that time, if I could feel that coming, I would preview it for him and say, listen, I think this is probably going to get to you by this time, and I know that's probably not great for you. Would you rather we have a meeting about it first so I preview it, or would you rather we schedule time in the morning the next day to deal with it, or whatever? I try to anticipate it. And I think that's how you do it. But, you know, I had one partner that liked things in a certain format, like in emails. He liked bullet points. He liked headers. So I started doing that for him. And another partner liked it in paragraph form. So you just kind of learn people's preferences. But that's a huge skill. It takes time. And I always encourage people to ask other, like our young attorneys, like if they don't know what those preferences are, go ask the other attorneys that are working for that partner. How does he like it? Do you have an example of a memo that you've written for him that you know he likes that style, so I can use that as a template or use that as a guide? That's one way to do it.
So something that I did notice is that, technically speaking, you always have to be somewhat of like a step ahead.
Yes.
So you could prevent any discomfort from the partner and stuff like that. So always learn to always try to be a step ahead and know the individual so you could prevent certain discomforts and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. And just like using your resources and not being kind of quiet alone in your office struggling and spinning your wheels, but actually get out there and feel confident to talk to other people, find mentors that are your peers to say, how would you do this, instead of feeling scared in your own office. And then I think you can get ahead faster at figuring it all out, for sure.
Does your organization like set specific goals? Like I know you have deadlines for the people you work with, but are there like goals set as the company as a whole to work towards?
Okay, that's a great question. Yes, we do have goals as a firm. We have goals at various different levels. I think you have to have that. We are chairman of our firm, that he sits in New York currently. He has strategic goals for certain type of clients we want to get, or certain types of a certain area of law we want to become more proficient at or do more work at. And so we have a policy committee that advises him on that, or he works with to sort of create that. That's at like the highest level of the company. And then at the office level, you know, I try to figure out what kind of goals we want to have for our office. As an example, our office is really focused right now on diversity and inclusion, and trying, particularly in our recruiting, to try to find a more diverse group of lawyers and to retain our diverse lawyers. So that's a particular goal, not just of the whole firm. It's also a goal of the whole firm, but it's a real focus in our office. And different offices have kind of different focuses. And so we'll then work with our firm-wide, in that example, the firm-wide diversity committees. And so that's just an example, but the answer is yes, we have goals. And then we also have we're also organized by department. So then the departments have goals. And within each department, we have practice groups. So I'm in the corporate department. There's a litigation department and a corporate department. I'm in the corporate department. The corporate department has goals, and the head of our corporate department came through to each office and met with us to talk about those goals, certain industries that we want to get into, learn more about, maybe hire more attorneys to help with who have an expertise in that area, for example. Then within the corporate group,